sufficient connections with this country to warrant First Amendment rights, which is wrong.
Yeah, and let's talk about how complicated that could get, because Ravi came here with a green card, right? So did he have some rights to be able to speak up until he was arrested, up until his wrongful conviction? Does he get rights back to speak after that? To go down the quagmire of determining when people get First Amendment rights is a real problem that we don't want to ever become practice in this country.
The best and fastest way for us to build that movement is by relationships. Because until we know the person sitting next to us might be undocumented or might be a non-citizen, we assume that it is not in our back door. We have seen this happen in various parts of the country where the business owner, the restaurant owner, was taken away, and everyone is shocked. This was a city or town that voted overwhelmingly for the president. And when they were taken away, they understood the impact of this president and these laws on those families, on that family, but also on them. And they rallied, and that has changed what is happening there. The other way that we need to be aware of is that we also need to become educated about what is happening. So sitting here is one form of education. It's a little more advanced than you need to be to actually get involved. What you want to do is understand the impact of a law that is how destructive it is, right? So when you look at Obama destroying 3 million lives, we may only think about it as the person who got deported. But what about the child and the spouse? Just that count alone, you're looking at 9 million people whose life was touched. When you look at the community they come from, what is the impact of that child, who are going to be our future, right? They are our future. Who, when their parents was getting deported, they were crying every single day. How could you expect that child to learn? How can you expect that child to reach its full potential? What we have created is a public health crisis. We will not see it now, but we will definitely see it. And when you have this type of mental trauma that is a public health crisis, even though we may think that this will be short-lived or short-term, the impact is going to be felt many years, if not a few generations ahead. Right? So for your question, the education is very important. The relationship is very important. And also to walk the walk. Don't just sit down and listen and learn, but walk the walk. And if you are seeing someone being in this crisis, step up. Step up and make an effort to get involved to stop that person's deportation. Whether you are accompanying them, whether you are making a phone call, writing a letter, calling Congress, calling your elected, calling, there are many ways that you can participate, and in participating, the system is using the fact that you think you cannot do anything. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you think you cannot do anything. Guess what? You have a lot of power. Everyone here has a lot of power. How many people have done accompaniments, right? If you ask anyone here, they will tell you that when you wear that button, which I don't have right now, but we have heard that from our allies. This friend of mine was telling me the story about a lawyer asking about the people who wear our buttons. And when the person said, "Why? I know who they are." She said, every time the people walking with the buttons, the judges get scared, right? You can change, and but we cannot do this by sitting down quietly. We know we have to start from the ground, right here. We don't always have to go to Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is the top, but the people are still acting here. When we change what is happening here, even though Washington, D.C. can push, we can still be able to protect people here. I will stop here. Thank you.
And go vote.
I take the example, oh, go ahead.
Go vote.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have the right to vote, please do. I also take the example of the migrant caravan hashtag. And as we've been talking here with New Sanctuary and with the folks who are at the border, and also the people who are part of this growing number of people seeking some strength in trying to seek asylum at the border, people who I work with every day who know what we do and who've been active said to me, just this morning I had this conversation, someone said, but Pastor Kaji, it is illegal for them to try to cross the border, right? Like, why would we stand for that? And I said, do you have no idea that it's not illegal to ask for asylum? Like, just the very beginning of the narrative of what's right and wrong requires resistance at every stop, because when you have the bully pulpit, when you have the check mark by your name and followers who don't know any way of being able to counter what you're saying, you might, if you were, say, a president, be able to convince people that this was illegal, which it's not. So that's, first of all, one of the issues. But I was talking to one of the people who's down working with organizing how the border communities are going to respond to the caravan, and he said, start telling the story. If you want to organize people to support these folks, tell their story. Ask the questions, what forced you to leave where you left? And then ask the question of the people you're talking to, what forces us to respond to that crisis? And if we're in the US and all we have to do is take a cursory look back at our history, at Honduras in 2009, and I don't have to give you all the dates, but El Salvador, Honduras, the Sandinistas, the work that the Contras, everything that we have done in Central America to destabilize that region that continues to have rippling effects, the chickens are coming home to roost, folks, and this is on us. So what forces us to respond is that we created this crisis. And when we lose the moral center of that, as if we don't have room, which we do, then I think we've lost ourselves as a nation, which we may well have done, but let's find it. Make America better.
So one more thing. I was listening to Stephen Colbert, and he was talking about the Khashoggi debt, and the Pat Robertson, this evangel pastor or prophet, was commenting on Khashoggi, and he said, "Is one man debt so important that will stop an arms deal?" And then Stephen Colbert said, "Is one man debt important to the Christian?"
He's talking about Jesus.
If you don't get that, that's right. So does one man debt matter? And when we talk about that, when we say one man debt, does one child debt or possible debt or one father or one mother, is that important? And that's where we are.
Yeah, that's good.
The caravan, I've just been getting more and more nervous as they get closer. And today Trump said he's sending troops.
800 troops, yeah.
So what is going to happen? There's 2,000 national guards going to get are people sort of organizing at the border to, thank God,
the situation is pretty complex at the border because there's already a backlog of 2,500 people, at least, who are in the shelters in Tijuana, For example, if you were looking at the San Isidro border, which is our most busy border in not just the country, but in the world, land crossing, we have 2,500 people who are in waiting. So what ICE has been doing and CBP have been doing is dumping people out of the shelter system, or rather the tent cities along the border, so that they're prepared for the migrant caravans. And what we don't know exactly is, for example, where the caravan will go, whether or not it will split. Will it go to California? Will it go to Texas? But in both places, there are people who have been doing the work of supporting migrants crossing for generations. So the people who've been doing that work are prepared to receive them. They do need financial support. I've already heard from the folks at Alliance San Diego who are looking for donations to support, especially the transportation as people cross to be able to get to their final destinations, so that people can show up for their notice to appears and so forth. So there's really good organization on the border, but we are actually working on an action for people of faith and others who are part of the sanctuary movement to be able to be present for that. And there will be more announcements on that coming soon. Ravi, do you want to say more?
Yeah, they're sending 800 troops to the border, and they're sending National Guard. What a lot of people don't remember is that the armed forces are not allowed to act on U.S. soil, right? And there's a reason for that, because it goes to the next step. It creates a space of military junta and a coup. So that one of the things that when you were doing is making sure that education. So we are going, if that happens, we as a country cannot let that go into that stage, because it actually will be, there's a slippery slope now. Mm-hmm. So when we do a call out, we have a lot of work to do, because you will need, you talked about money, but you also need people to witness, you need lawyers, you need community support, you need money to bond people out who are in detention. So you need